Nobody expects a war to begin on a Sunday jog. Not the kind with guns and shame and broken systems, anyway. Sunday jogs are supposed to be ordinary. You check the weather, tie your laces, maybe wave at a dog walker or two. But on that morning, the air in Cedar Grove Estates was different. It was too still, like the calm before something ancient and unspoken. I remember because I felt it, a tightness in my chest, a whisper in my gut. We had only lived here for 2 months, moved for the quiet, for the illusion of safety. We even joked about it, Cedar Grove, where nothing happens. And for a while, that held true. Sarah was finally relaxing. After years in the Marine Corps training recruits and seeing more than her share of chaos, she had found comfort in morning jogs and tending to a vegetable patch out back. She liked her routines, lacing up just before sunrise, stretching in the hallway like she was still prepping a squad. Me, I'd sit on the porch with my mug, watching the sun paint gold on the lawn. I'd hear her feet on the sidewalk before I saw her, steady, rhythmic. It made me feel like the world was all right. But that day, everything was off. There was shouting. A car door slammed. Then another. Tires scraped asphalt. And when I ran out to the street, heart hammering against my ribs, I saw the crowd. People huddled at the edge of the trail, phones raised, tension rippling like heat off pavement. And there she was, my daughter, facing down a man with a gun. She didn't flinch, didn't speak, just stood there, sweat on her brow, her gaze locked in. The man was shaking, middle-aged, uniform unbuttoned, aviators pushed to his forehead like a cop from a gas station calendar. That was Vince. Vince Malone, Cedar Grove's self-proclaimed protector. "Show me your ID," he yelled. No greeting, no explanation, just power and panic wrapped in a plastic badge. Sarah raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me?" "Suspicious behavior," he snapped. "You're not on the list." "What list?" she asked, voice flat. "I don't have to answer questions. I need your identification." "Now." I saw her inhale, one of those slow, deliberate breaths that she used to take before entering hostile training scenarios. She stepped forward. "Vince," she said, calm, "you're pointing a weapon at an unarmed citizen on a public path. You sure that's a smart move?" He barked something unintelligible, but the gun shook. That's when I saw the mistake in his eyes. The realization that he was outmatched, outtrained, outclassed. Sarah closed the distance in a blur. Disarmament is an art form when done right. She twisted his wrist, dropped the mag, disassembled the slide in one fluid motion, and let the pieces fall between them like confetti. The silence that followed was louder than the shouts before it. Then the crowd erupted. Some gasped. Some laughed. One guy even clapped. Sarah stepped back, exhaled, and turned to Vince. "Call your supervisor," she said. He blinked. "Oh," she added, "you don't have one." That's right. And in that moment, everyone watching knew. This wasn't just some crazy incident. This was the first shot in something bigger. Certainly not in Cedar Grove Estates. The name itself sounds like a place where nothing bad ever happens. Manicured lawns, sleepy cul-de-sacs, the faint smell of sprinklers in the morning. Peaceful, predictable. Or so I thought. Until I watched my daughter stare down the barrel of a gun. She stood in running shoes and a sweat-stained t-shirt, brow glistening, lips curled into something that wasn't quite a smile, more like a dare. The man pointing the gun? Vince Malone, a self-appointed security god with fake police decals and delusions of authority. It happened fast. One moment I was sipping coffee on the porch, half listening to birds and the distant thump of Sarah's running shoes. The next, shouts, screeching tires. My mug shattered on the concrete as I bolted. There was a crowd forming near the community trail. Phones out, gasps, and in the middle of it all, Sarah, unshaken, focused. Show ID! Now! Vince barked, his voice cracking under pressure. You're trespassing! Suspicious behavior! Sarah tilted her head slightly like she was examining a math problem. And if I don't? Vince's grip on the pistol tightened. I said, show it. She took a single step forward, hands raised just high enough to appear non-threatening, but her body spoke another language. Total control. Vince, she said, voice soft as thread, you sure you want to point that thing at me? You sure you want to make a mistake you can't erase? His hand trembled. In 3 seconds flat, she was inside his reach. One twist, one strike. The gun broke into pieces on the ground. Magazine here, slide there. Vince blinked like he'd just been unplugged from the Matrix. The crowd erupted. Cheers, gasps, even claps. Sarah stepped back, dusting her hands. Call your superior, she said. Pause. Oh, wait, you don't have one. Real sheriff deputies arrived 10 minutes later. One shook her hand. The other smirked at Vince. But the HOA? They weren't smiling. Mrs. Caldwell, the president, stormed onto the scene in heels and perfume that could clear sinuses. Please, she whispered to Sarah. Don't press charges. Think of the community. We'll waive your dues for a year. Let's all just breathe. Sarah smiled. Slow, calculated. I'll think about it, she said. I knew that smile. That smile meant war. What the HOA didn't know. Sarah wasn't just a retired Marine instructor. She was a strategist, a woman who once trained others in psychological warfare. And now she had a target. She didn't strike immediately. That's not how she works. Instead, she played it cool. Jogged the same routes, greeted neighbors, chatted about rose bushes and lawn pests. But she was gathering intel. It didn't take long. Vince wasn't just some vigilante on a power trip. He was on payroll, hired off the books, no background check, no community vote, paid through something called a beautification fund. The same fund that was supposed to plant flowers near the playground. Instead, it fueled his SUV, his knockoff badge, and his oversized ego. That's when Sarah started building her case. She mapped it out. Photos, interviews, receipts. A literal corkboard in the garage with yarn connecting HOA funds to Vince's so-called patrol expenses. And that's not all. One night, we planted discreet trail cams near the clubhouse, HOA office, and common paths. Within 72 hours, the footage made my stomach turn. Vince threatening a teenager for biking too fast, accusing a mother of throwing an illegal birthday party for using balloons, demanding a $400 fine on the spot. Each time, his hand hovered near his belt, where the fake pistol sat. Sarah was ice. She reviewed the clips in silence. This isn't just misconduct, she said. It's systematic intimidation. She wasn't wrong, but she wasn't done. The next HOA meeting, Sarah showed up with a tray of brownies and a fake smile. She introduced herself as just a concerned new resident. Within 20 minutes, she was sitting next to Mrs. Caldwell, complimenting her manicure while secretly recording the entire conversation. That jogger's going to be a problem, Caldwell whispered to another board member. Fine her. Whatever it takes. Get her out. Sarah looked up, nodded politely, and bit into a brownie. Her recorder blinked green. That night, she leaned back at the dining table, staring at a laptop. They want war? Fine. Let's give them the kind they don't see coming. She didn't just want Vince fired. She wanted to crack the entire operation wide open. Every backroom deal, every hushed conversation, every neighbor who'd been too scared to speak. Over the next 2 weeks, Sarah turned our home into an investigation hub. Post-it notes lined the kitchen wall. A whiteboard filled with names, timestamps, HOA bulletins. She interviewed neighbors under the guise of small talk. Some were hesitant, eyes darting toward the clubhouse, but a few, especially the older ones, opened up. They'd been fined for phantom violations, pressured to vote certain ways, even harassed over tiny garden decorations. One woman, Mrs. Alvarez, broke down crying when Sarah asked about her late husband's military flagpole. "They said it was a hazard," she whispered. "They made me take it down." Sarah wrote everything down. She took photos, compared dates, dug through public records, and even found a trail of reimbursements to Vince from the HOA's budget, signed off under fake maintenance projects. But there were setbacks too. One of her hidden cameras was stolen. Someone dumped trash on our lawn. Our mailbox was mysteriously ripped out one morning. "They're panicking," she said. That means we're close." And she kept pushing, harder, deeper. She wasn't just building a case, she was building a story, one the entire neighborhood could see. We stayed polite, smiled at Vince, paid our dues early, let the HOA believe they'd won. That's when the violations began. First, a formal warning about our American flag being unauthorized. Then, a notice about Sarah's disruptive jogging schedule. Then, a citation for overgrown lawn, despite our yard looking like a golf course. Sarah documented everything. One morning, her tires were slashed. A fake parking ticket called her a reckless operator. She didn't rage. She didn't even curse. She checked the security footage. There he was, Vince, knife in hand, laughing. "Got him," she muttered, freezing the frame. She compiled a report, videos, audio, timestamps, witness statements, and submitted it not only to the sheriff, but also to the local news, the district attorney, and a state HOA oversight board. But public embarrassment? That would be the real punishment. She planned an event, Patriots' Day, honoring our local veterans. Flyers everywhere, news outlets notified. She even got the mayor's office to RSVP. The HOA couldn't object. Not without revealing their anti-veteran agenda. They promoted it themselves, thinking it would help clean their image. The stage was set. Our lawn became a patriotic paradise. Flags, ribbons, catered BBQ, a podium flanked by folding chairs. Neighbors came out in droves. Local press set up cameras. Sarah took the mic. "Service is about protecting others, even when it's uncomfortable," she began. She thanked veterans, told a story about leadership and sacrifice. Then came the turn. But service doesn't end when you hang up the uniform. Sometimes you serve by standing up when others sit down. The projector clicked on. Video played, Vince shaking down teenagers, Caldwell mocking residents, audio clips, documents, even HOA emails, gasps, then outrage. Neighbors shouted, reporters swarmed. One elderly woman cried. Deputies arrived on cue, handing over investigation warrants. One leaned into the mic. "Thanks to Ms. Carter's evidence, a full inquiry has been launched." The board members tried to slip out. Vince was nowhere to be seen. The next day, headline news. Fake cop terrorizes veteran's daughter, HOA board complicit. A week later, petitions, a recall vote, Mrs. Caldwell and 4 others, removed, replaced by actual residents with spines and souls. An audit uncovered misuse of funds, abuse of power, and enough legal violations to sink a real city council. Homeowners associations across the county reviewed their policies. Vince? Arrested for impersonation, harassment, and vandalism. Turns out he'd done this before, in 3 other neighborhoods. Nobody had ever stood up to him, until Sarah. Weeks passed. Cedar Grove changed, and so did Sarah. One evening, as we sat in the garden, our garden, quiet and full of light, she stared out at the rows of sunflowers she'd planted. She was barefoot, a rare sight. Her usual steel softened into something almost gentle. For the first time in months, her shoulders weren't tight. "You know," she said quietly, "I didn't realize how much of myself I'd packed away when I left the Corps. Like I was trying to be smaller, quieter, civilian. But standing up to them? It wasn't about revenge. It was about remembering who I am. And helping others remember, too." She paused, eyes still on the blooms. You can't always protect people with a badge or a gun. Sometimes you do it by planting seeds, asking questions, refusing to shut up. I watched her and thought of every neighbor who now walked a little taller, every child playing without fear, every flag waving without apology. Cedar Grove had changed. But not because it wanted to, because one woman made sure it had to. People smiled more. Flags flew again. Sidewalk chalk reappeared. At a neighborhood cookout, Mr. Jenkins, a Korean War vet, stood up and raised his beer. To the lady who reminded us that courage isn't always loud. Sometimes it just wears sneakers. Applause, laughter, tears. Sarah shrugged it off, flipping a burger. "I didn't do much," she said. "Just refused to be quiet." A month later, the new board hosted a dedication ceremony. Near the community garden, a small bronze plaque was unveiled. "In gratitude to those who stand for what's right, Cedar Grove thanks Sarah Carter." She smiled, then turned back to her sunflowers. Somewhere, a new neighbor asked about the plaque. Old Man Larson chuckled. "Let me tell you about the jogger who took down the entire HOA." And the story began again.